Hello, and thank you for listening to Critical Thinking is Required. This is our third reflection, and we're going to see how it's going to work. It's on YouTube, so you can always watch this video of just me talking on YouTube if you want to, or you can listen to the podcast, which is what I would do if I were you, and listen on to criticalthinkingisrequired.com, and you can check out the podcast that way. But again, thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you enjoy this very quick reflection just generally about critical thinking and about what I've been thinking about critical thinking for the past few weeks or months or years or whatever. But I've been especially thinking about it ever since a discussion I had and always on Facebook, always some great, interesting discussions, but I had regarding the episode on Israel and Hamas. So hopefully I'll stop bringing that episode up, but because I keep talking about it for some reason, I don't know why. But I think it was because it's such a complicated issue. It's not like the Pinkerton Agency or qualified immunity where I can just look up and it's kind of easy. I had to read, 30 articles. I spent a lot of time on that. And it was a complicated episode, and I think we did an okay job putting it down to something that was more understandable. But I did want to talk about critical thinking because I was having a discussion, on our Critical Thinking is Required Facebook page about reason and logic and ethos and all these fancy words. And I've been thinking about fancy words a lot, especially since I've been listening. Thank you to Justin, one of the listeners, for mentioning School Sucks podcast. So it's not my favorite podcast anymore. I've listened to other ones that I feel are better, but it's definitely worth listening to, and it's definitely worth subscribing to for sure, because it does make you think. And it does offer something, and it's free, so why not? But when I listen to that show, sometimes the reason I didn't like the show, and I don't like the show, is because it's too complicated. Not necessarily the history and facts and stuff. I like that stuff. Sometimes, of course, you're probably even listening to my shows, and you're not going to absorb everything. I don't even absorb everything, and I'm teaching it, which is one of the best ways to learn, and I'm definitely learning. But even listening to it 5 or 6 times, you're not going to absorb everything. It's impossible. That's just not how learning works, or education, or whatever you want to define it as. And I guess one of the problems I have is just these big words that they use. And I try to use as small words as I can. And I don't know if it's the problem of philosophy or, this is a reflection, so I've been thinking about this for a while. And I've been thinking about, let's say economics or even political science. Every field has these things where they make up these complicated words to make things more complicated than it should be. And I would say it's probably to, sort of job protection. Look at it in the argument against lawyers, because that's an easy one, right? So lawyers, what they do is they make things complicated. They add actions to a claim, let's say. So now there's all these statutes that you have that are generally created by Congress or by a legislator who are generally composed of lawyers, right? Or they're trying to make the law. And what they're going to have is they're going to have a law that's going to prohibit something or provide a claim in a civil court for the same thing on multiple different levels. So, for example, and again, it goes back to For New Liberty and trying to understand these fundamental definitions. Because I'm not against defining things, and I'm not against fancy words, but just make it easy. Why make it complicated? And just try to make it as easy as possible. And maybe, I guess, you could make it I just don't get it. I don't get complication. And so what lawyers will do is that, let's say again with property rights. Okay, so let's say just theft. Man, you have a theft statute, and it defines theft, and then you just apply that to all scenarios where theft could possibly be involved. But now you have things like conversion or trespass to chattels, right? So you have these additional actions that the legislator creates, probably because either the courts created it or they made it more complicated than it should have been. And so now you have multiple claims for the same thing. And the way I'm applying this to critical thinking, I guess, is that, or philosophy or all this stuff, is why make it complicated? Why not just focus on theft and defining theft and just work on your definition of theft? Maybe you're lacking there somewhere. And so, again, I'm off track here as always. I was thinking about critical thinking. And what is critical thinking? And I remember in my interview with Brett Venat with School Sucks podcast, the host of there and creator and all that stuff, he had asked me a question, or I had asked him about critical thinking or something, but he had asked me how I defined it, and I came up with an answer on the spot. I've never even thought about defining critical thinking. I just thought it was thinking. Like, that's how I would define it, thinking. Whatever that is. It's like, I don't even, like, it's a really hard thing to define. And he said some fancy thing, like, and it kind of agreed with mine, where it was like knowledge, understanding, and I think I came up with understanding, knowledge, and application or something. And he did wisdom and knowledge and something else. And I kept thinking, like, I don't know, it's just weird. Like, knowledge isn't critical thinking, okay? Knowledge is just knowing a fact. A fact is not critical thinking. And even wisdom I'd probably say is critical thinking. But you don't need to have those other two things. You could just have wisdom, right? Because wisdom kind of solves everything, because that's like you knowing that you don't know anything. Like, to me, that's what wisdom is, whatever. And still, I just don't know, but. And then application. So he had something where I had application, but he had something that was equivalent to application. And I kept thinking, why is application part of critical thinking? I mean, I don't really get that, because you're just thinking like that. Again, you're thinking. So what I'm doing here, and I don't know if I did say it in the beginning, maybe I already forgot, but when you check out criticalthinkingisrequired.com, I have a thing that's on the home thing, and the home button, and it says definitions. And what I'm trying to do is define everything I can in the most clear and concise way. And so I've done that with a few things. And now I'm going to come up with one for critical thinking. So I could steal Brett Venat's, which I don't really agree with, so I'm not going to do that. I could do mine, but I don't really agree with that either. I just came up with that on ad him. Then I have one that I found online that I'm going to post a meme, and it was critical thinking skills. It's a little circle. And it's got 5 things that make up critical thinking. And I think Wikipedia kind of matched this too. And it was reasoning, evaluating, problem solving, decision making, and analyzing. So you had all these things. Well, a lot of that stuff is like the same thing. You're just trying to make it complicated again. Maybe it's because you want it to be a hexagram, and you have to have 5 things just like in the picture. Maybe if you had 4 things and you want it to be a square, you're going to come up with 4 things. I don't know why you'd want to have that, because it kind of resembles a stop sign. Was that octagon? So maybe not. But bottom line is problem solving. I mean, is that the same thing as decision making? I mean, analyzing and evaluating. Are those the same things? But no, I have to define it. I have to make it complicated. So just like I'm making this show complicated. And so let's define critical thinking. And I'm thinking, to me, critical thinking, and I've thought about this for a few days now, is curiosity. Curiosity. That's it. It's not applying anything, because that's not what this show does either. Like, yeah, I provide solutions at the end, and I go, you know what? These are some solutions, and I'm sure you might come up with some ones or better ones. And you might be able to apply those, but I think I'm asking too much. Like, I'd much rather you think critically and just be curious about things and not be okay with what you hear, and rather want to hear many things from many different points of views, to understand their biases, to see what is in their self-interest, because we all act in our own self-interest, whether it's government, a corporation, an individual. And so that to me is critical thinking. It's simply curiosity. Now, I did think perpetual curiosity. I was trying to make it fancy, because it's, to me, like always asking questions, like always just, this. But then I thought, you know what, and maybe that is a better one, because you should always be asking questions. Because even if you believe something, that 5 does equal 5, you need to keep asking yourself, well, the next day, does it still equal 5? Or 20 days later, does it still equal 5? And that's what I'm trying to argue for, is that it's so maybe I'll do perpetual. There we go. Perpetual curiosity. So it's not just curiosity for 5 seconds to go, I've looked at 3 articles. Okay, 5 equals 5. I agree. It's simple. No, you come back 5-10 days later and you do it. And then the other thing I was thinking was, and you could add to the definition to make it more complicated, but I think perpetual curiosity, right? Because you're curious. Remember, you wake up in the morning, you open your eyes. The first thing you should be thinking, should I get up or should I stay in bed? Okay, so you could stop or you could continue. Well, if I stay in bed, I got to pee. So maybe I should go to the bathroom. but I kind of like, I'm comfortable. The pillow's nice, but maybe it'll mess up my back. Well, the baby's crying, but maybe the baby will go back to sleep. You know what? She was quiet for a little bit, but I really got to go pee. But no, I'll just keep sitting here. But, well, I need to get up because I need to do something productive today. You know what? I need to produce and create. I need to not be a parasite of this nation on the backbone. Yeah, I need to be a worker, damn it. And so I'm going to do something positive to contribute to society or my family or myself, right? That's the stuff that, and maybe you don't live that way, but that's how I unfortunately live my life, where everything is constant critical thinking. And I feel bad for my wife because it's just horrible for her to just, if, where are we going to go eat? Well, I have to think critically about that. So not only do I have to think about what I want, I got to think about what my kids want, my wife wants. I got to think about what's going to happen after the fact, whether I'll be sitting on the can or not for an hour. I got to think about how much it is, what kind of food, what kind did I have yesterday, whether there'll be leftovers, because that might save money. And again, I'm making this really long, but that's the point. It's perpetual critical thinking, and you can do or perpetual curiosity. It's just wanting to keep asking questions. I mean, you could even asking questions. Maybe you could define that as critical thinking. But I think curiosity comes with asking questions to me. So it's a shortened way. See, I can do it in one word rather than two. If I can do that, that's what I'm going to do because that makes it easier. And, and critical thinking is not saying someone's dumb and stopping the conversation, because that's what happened on Facebook in our conversation. You say to me that I lack, maybe I'm not, we had this in a separate somewhere else, but maybe I'm not knowledgeable. Maybe I missed a fact. Okay. That doesn't end the conversation. To suggest that being dumb in one instance sidelines your whole argument is to suggest that nobody should be listened to, because nobody's perfect and everybody makes mistakes and nobody knows everything. Why? Because we perpetually are curious. We know nothing, because the facts are only relative to what we understand at now. And it's defined by people who have biases, who have their points of view, their self-interest, and they're going to put that before anything else. So you should always be thinking critically. Now I'm going to post the meme because I think it's interesting. But I ask you to define critical thinking, and I ask you to think about, perpetually be curious about what it is. And I don't know, when you think about a subject like Hamas and Israel, again, I said I wouldn't talk about it. I always break that promise. And you're thinking about, even after I did it, one of the things I missed was that, and I didn't even hear this in the debate of criticizing me, this is what you would say, is what would happen if we didn't support them? Would they be eradicated? Well, I've been thinking about that perpetually for the past few days, although that's forever. And it's only been 3 days. But I was thinking, well, and I said this in the episode. I said, well, Israel has 260 billion compared to Gaza that has, 6 billion GDP. And we give 3 billion aid to Israel. So let's take 3 away. And maybe, just maybe, Israel could find 3 billion from the 260 billion. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's got to tax its people, but if that's what the people, the government thinks is the solution, is using warfare to protect themselves, then that's what they do. I mean, it's that simple. So, yeah, I missed it, but it doesn't discard the conversation. And so another example I had, and Facebook always provides these wonderful examples, which is why I've actually stopped, and I continue to do this, participating in groups on Facebook, because unless it's something like group I really enjoy, but I haven't done that yet, so I don't know. And if it's something I really want to talk about, but because people aren't providing any useful feedback, there's no real criticism, there's no real comments that are educated in any way. Where I had one discussion, we were talking about like stop and frisk and comparing it to something, and I said something, and the person responded with saying it was a false equivalency. Well, now we're using a fancy word that I've never heard about. Maybe I did in school and I forgot all about it. So I Googled it and I said, oh, false equivalency is comparing something to something else. That's not really real. And then I kept hearing all these YouTube videos from Voluntary Virtues, and they were using this fancy word too. And I was like, oh, so to me, but what I learned was it's basically just a way to get out of having to discuss a topic and to think critically. It's one of those, it's ad hominem is another fancy word that you can use, or saying that you're not using reason or logic. These are ways that you can get out of the conversation. So, and back to the false equivalency thing. I mean, if I'm comparing an apple and an orange, you can make both arguments. You could say it's a false equivalency, but the bottom line, they're both fruits. Okay. I could compare an apple with an apple. But if I compared, let's say, an apple and a cucumber, even that isn't necessarily a false equivalency because, yeah, they're not both fruits, but they're both things we eat. There's that critical thinking. So it's outside the box, right? It's not what everyone would probably go, oh, okay. And so that's my bottom line with this reflection, is just continue to ask questions, continue to think, and don't stop. And don't stop other people from thinking. Don't tell them they're dumb. That doesn't do anything. That doesn't solve it. That doesn't help people think critically to tell someone that they're dumb or unknowledgeable, because we all are dumb. We all are. I don't care who you are. You could be the great Ron Paul. You could be the great Walter Block, who I'm really liking lately, besides some of his conservative cultural kind of things. But bottom line is that nobody's perfect. Nobody knows everything. And continue to think. And work on that definition of critical thinking and what it means to you. And when you think of a topic, and when you see something, or when you deal with something on a daily basis, whether you eat or run or learn or whatever, think critically. Okay? So thank you for listening to this show. And make sure you check out criticalthinkingisrequired.com if you liked something like this reflection. Again, the reflections are really only supposed to be for people who really like this show and really like what some things I have to say. Maybe not everything, because I don't even like everything I have to say. But if you're at least interested, me, if I can find a podcast that I'm semi-interested in, it's like gold to me, and I will listen to it. Because there are so few podcasts now that I enjoy because nobody is producing anything for some reason that I will take what I can. So hopefully you can do the same thing with this. But thank you for listening, and as always, think critically.